Hello and welcome to the Hildebrand Project newsletter for November 2020. I'm Christopher Haley, the Director of Publications and Marketing. I'm joined today by Catherine Beagle, our Programs Manager, and Mario Delucci and Catherine Yanko, who are two of the instructors for our online reading groups. That is what we are here to talk about today, is this wonderful new program that we've just started, and we're about to start the second round of our reading groups, which we talked about them a while ago, and I think they're off to a great start. Catherine Beagle is managing these, so I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to give us an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've really been looking over these reading groups from like a bird's eye perspective, and I am very excited to hear from Mario and Catherine about their experiences of leading the groups. But we are getting, as Christopher said, we're getting ready to start our second round of groups. The schedules are already posted on the website. You can already go and sign up for those. We have 5 coming up for November. And then in September and October, we completed 13 groups on a variety of different topics. The groups are scheduled in such a way that if you're a beginner to Hildebrand, you can sign up for a 1-session group, and you can join us for an hour and a half to have an introduction to the text. What are the key themes? What should you be looking for as you're reading those smaller works? Or you could join us for a multi-session group and meet over several weeks to really go in deep with one of our instructors for these works of Hildebrand. Yeah.
Now, Catherine, how much do these reading groups cost?
They're free. No,
they're free.
Yeah.
How wonderful. How generous of the Hildebrand Project to do that.
All you have to do is have a copy of the book. That's all we ask, so you can follow along.
So if this is your first time hearing about the reading groups, we started these as a way to bring people together and to form a community over the course of the year. Our in-person events always form these wonderful communities, but then they end. So people always want more. And this has been our answer to that, a way to do more. And also a way to help people who might be wondering how to get into a book, if this book is for me. Can I read philosophy? Should I read philosophy? To give a resounding and generous yes to all those questions. So it's a very unique program, and we're very excited about it so far. So Catherine Beagle, anything else to add about it?
No, not
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's turn it over to some of our reading group hosts. Please introduce yourselves to our viewers here who might not know you. I'll start with just at the top of my screen here, Mario Delucci, who is running reading groups on Beauty in the Light of the Redemption. Mario, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for inviting me here. And my name is Mario Delucci. I teach philosophy at the University of Dallas. I hope you can hear me well enough. I'm speaking loud enough. And I've been hosting groups on this small collection of essays on aesthetics. And von Hildebrand wrote these essays throughout his career. In fact, his interest in art and beauty spans his entire career. I believe he was only 18 years old when he gave his first public lecture on matter and form in art. And so this is very representative of his whole philosophy. And I found so far that the students who attend these groups are very interested in the topic. And it's a topic which has been neglected by and large by philosophers and philosophy professors, as well as their students. So it's been a pleasure to host these groups so far. They've been going very well. I would like to have many more. I would also like to have extended groups maybe every other week on the major treatise that von Hildebrand wrote at the end of his life in the 70s, when he was 80 years old. I think working at Fordham University. It's a 2-volume, nearly 1,000-page treatise on beauty in general, in art, in nature, and also in moral values. He has this concept of metaphysical beauty, which I think fascinates students. The way in which beauty is like the first draw. It draws us up out of ourselves into the world of values in general, which carry a message from beyond. And so there's a way in which we can listen to a beautiful piece of music, look at a beautiful painting. And he says, even observe the humblest beauties, beauty of a flower, beauty of a blue sky, and we are breathing the air of moral values. So,
Yeah, it's such poetic language all throughout that book and through aesthetics. I think, you know, you mentioned the beauty of the moral values, and it's interesting in the work. It's something that Hildebrand kind of sets aside in a way, right? He sets out this whole description of the moral values and say, okay, so those are moral values, and what we're going to talk about are the aesthetic values. But the description of the moral values is actually really wonderful and very valuable on its own. So you don't want to, you know, skip ahead. There's a lot to that. I'm curious how in the groups, how your students are finding some of the Hildebrand's points. Like one of the major points, of course, in Beauty and the Light of the Redemption is, you know, that beauty is not a luxury but a necessity, right? He argues against this view of beauty being excess. How does that strike? How does that go over in your groups?
I think they're very receptive to that idea, that it's in a universal objective good, even though many people who benefit from that good may not be focused on it, may not be reflectively aware of its good. They're receptive to that, and I think that's a very important message, precisely because we live in a time right now where the artistic establishment, by and large, has done away with beauty. It sees the raison d'etre of art as being otherwise, maybe to shock us, maybe to editorialize or critique society, but not to give us beauty. And so they're appreciative of the importance of beauty. At the same time, the idea of beauty as a luxury, as an adornment of life, is also still attractive, because there's a sense in which appreciating an aesthetic value is not as urgent as responding to a moral value. I think that there's a lot to learn about von Hildebrand's claim that there's an affinity between the beautiful and the good. And he'll oftentimes evoke the ancient Greek word kalokagathon, this fusion of the ideas of beauty, of goodness and perfection, which we find in the ancient philosophers. We find it in Aristotle, when he says that the virtuous man must look towards the kalos, which can be translated in various ways, as noble, as fine, which I think is a terrible translation, but also as beautiful.
I think there was a long kind of moralist tradition of translating that as good, even though I think in most people in classics would tell you that it's more likely means something like beautiful or fine, or, you know, and this sense seems to be coming back. This is kalos kai agathos for people wondering, which is the good and the beautiful, and these get combined into this sort of word for the, I don't want to say too much on it, but it's the good thing that Aristotle's after, and so you have this real classical precedent there. And I really wanted to keep talking about that, but then we're going to go way too long. So if you like that discussion, sign up for one of Mario's groups, and I'm sure he's going to talk to you all about it. But I want to ask Catherine Yanko now how your groups are going. Well, first, introduce yourself to our viewers here.
Hi, my name is Catherine Yanko. I'm a PhD student at the Catholic University of America, where I study moral theology and ethics. So I'm leading the group on Hildebrand's The Art of Living. It's a collection of radio lectures and then supplemented by a few essays by his late wife, Alice von Hildebrand. The book is primarily concerned with like the virtuous life. It's how to be a good person, and it kind of goes along with the Christian tradition that the good life is the happy one. But the twist that Hildebrand, or I guess maybe the emphasis that he takes in this book, is looking at experience. So it's very much in the phenomenological tradition. I think it's a really beautiful expression of a phenomenology of virtue, because the book is, throughout the chapters, he like paints a picture of like examples and anti-examples of all the different virtues. And so you have a really, really clear understanding of kind of what's what he's meaning by these, and it's not obscure. I think so much of philosophy can be too abstract, and then we get lost in it. We don't know what it means or why it's relevant anymore. But this book it's immediate, because of these pictures that he paints, it's immediately relevant. You very much know the misery that he's talking about, of the being friends with someone who's a chronic liar, or, you know, the joy it is to experience reverence in the way that he describes. So I guess in my groups, maybe there's two things that I found just really interesting that I didn't expect. So the first was one of the themes of the book, not to give too much away, because I do hope you sign up. We have one more group, but there's this theme, this continual theme, that virtue helps people develop into who they are as a person. So it's not this idea of virtue that it's kind of like that charity looks a certain way for everyone, and everyone has to look the same way. For Hildebrand, when he talks about different virtues like veracity, everyone expresses it a little bit differently because they're individuals. And so this connection between the moral and the personal is something that I think is a really beautiful supplement to other aspects of the Christian tradition. And it's been really interesting to hear. One of my groups, that was the consistent theme that we went back to every week, was just picking out how personality develops with virtue. And so that was, I mean, it was fascinating. And then maybe the second thing that was really interesting in discussion was I really tried to push the students to kind of reflect in the way that Hildebrand does on this. So Hildebrand, he talks about what the virtues are, but then he uses these examples. And so we kind of went through in some weeks and tried to think about our own examples from our own lives. So when we were talking about something like faithfulness, which for him is more like steadfastness, I think, than like something with like a religious connotation, we would talk about different examples in our life of maybe moral exemplars or people or situations where we've seen this, you know, these kind of virtues being lived out. And so I think that's been something that I've really liked about this format and this discussion, being in the phenomenological tradition, is that we have the space to actually reflect on life together, and not just debate and like get into the nitty gritty. That being said, I mean, we do talk about like what is actually the meaning, you know, of the text and what's going on, but it's been really life-giving, you know, pun totally intended on the title there, Art of Living, but it's just been incredible to see the way that different people's life is just enriched each other from their experiences and sharing that way. So I've really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to the second, or actually this will be the third time going through it. So it just gets better every time for me.
Do
Yeah,
I need to be a phenomenologist to read either of these books or to discuss them?
Not at
Do
all.
I need to have already had artistic experiences to understand reading the Light of the Redemption? Or
Well, that's a good question, because von Hildebrand will tell you that there are great degrees of aesthetic experience. You can't expect everyone coming to the topic to have experienced the full breadth and richness and depth of what beauty is able to give. Nevertheless, von Hildebrand also says many times that we all have been touched by beauty. We all know what it is. And we've already opened the door, had the door open to us towards those depths. And in terms of whether you have to be a phenomenologist, no, not at all, because I think the thing about von Hildebrand's approach to philosophy is he doesn't start with a pre-established system, some theoretical structure, nor does he make the priority the exegesis of a text, nor does he begin with some sophisticated definition. He starts with the thing itself, how it unfolds itself in experience. And so his method is descriptive, and that means poetic. He's not like a lot of modern analytic philosophers who try to do away with adverbs and adjectives in their philosophical language. And so he's very accessible. His prose is very readable. So yes, no on both questions.
I think maybe just to add on that too is like the demographic of my participants has been like really a wide range of people, and I think that's made it most enjoyable. It's not philosophy students, at least for mine. We've had a lot of maybe late middle-aged stay-at-home moms for their whole career. We've had some younger men and women who were teachers, nurses, business people, psychologists. I guess we just had like a really big levels of experience with philosophy, but I think that for reading this text, like the only experience that you really need to come into it is your own. I don't think, at least for Art of Living, I think that when people get reading it, it's intuitive and it's obvious what he's talking about. And it's when you start reading that book, you start thinking about your own life almost immediately, or your own like family and friends. And so I think it does challenge people maybe to a new level of reflection, but I don't think it's not, that kind of reflection isn't something that you achieve by reading more and more books. It's the kind of reflection that, the turning inward and kind of like the further in and further up of the human soul than it is about, this like weird notion of being an expert in philosophy to be able to join a reading group like this.
Yeah.
That's correct. And you don't have to read any other philosophy book. The best way, I think, to read him, and it would suffice in itself, is if you read him slowly and meditatively. Every time he raises an example, you think about that example. You read with your imagination, and your imagination drawing from your own experience. I think it helps also to appropriate his insights with your own examples, to make them your own. This is something everyone can do.
This is one of the things I think is so valuable about the discussions also, is being able to come up with more examples. And 'cause there's a way to read, certainly if you read quickly and non-reflexively, that, it seems canonical, and it's like, it's not just these canonical examples. It's very open. These are examples are not meant to define so much as to lead you to an understanding of these experiences in your own life. They're abundant. These things I think come up a lot in discussion. And just to comment quickly on something you had noted also, Catherine. I've dropped in on a few of the groups occasionally and looked at the signups, and I've been just overwhelmed really by like the breadth of people and both in their levels of interest and in education, and also just where they are. Right. I mean, we've got these groups that have people from like 4 or 5 continents all at the same time. I can't say I was quite expecting that I didn't know what we expected. I mean, we knew it was, it's the internet, so it's global, anyone can join, but it's so neat to actually see that happen and to see, these discussions happening literally all over the world at the same time. So I think that's a lot of fun. I'm sure as reading group host, that's probably a lot of fun and interesting for you too. That's so different than the kind of your very local group of students you're normally teaching. And so I'll ask just this last question to the two of you, like running these reading groups, like what have you learned, or what has been different in these reading groups than in your own classes that you teach, or other discussions that you lead at UD and CUA respectively? I know it's a hard question. I didn't warn you about it.
I think for me, the most notable thing, like we've already said, is the breadth of people. I was actually able to be a participant in one of the groups on the book called Graven Images. And so the book is about substitutes for true morality. And there was a woman from England, and she would ask questions about American pop culture right now. And, try to get a better understanding of the way that Americans have substitutes for morality. And then it was really interesting to hear her perspective of how she worded it back to us of what was going on with American culture, because sometimes it just does take that fresh set of eyes and the outsider perspective to really be able to understand a situation that you're immersed in constantly. So it was really interesting, I guess, for that aspect of it. The breadth of people, probably for me, I think the way that I've done my groups, I'm not sure if Mario, if you do the same, is I don't really like to make it an academic-y kind of environment or thing. They try to make it more of, I do explain the book and, give these definitions and kind of help orient people, but I really just try to lead the discussion and kind of with the goal in mind of how I've been able to experience most Hildebrand Project events of community. And so of just trying to form friendships, getting to know one another. And so, I mean, it's really easy with Art of Living to do that, but I don't run my classrooms like that. We're not like trying to delve into and understand our own experience and help each other, and kind of understanding what is virtue in the virtuous life, or what does it mean to live well. So I think getting that more personal take on it, and not having to sit in the abstract and try to later on put the abstract down to reality. We're able to like kind of go back and forth with the freedom of not being in a strictly academic environment. So I like that aspect of it. It's very real.
Right. Well, I think that's the best way to go about it too, and it makes it much easier. For one of the reasons is because we have people come from all over. They're not necessarily philosophy students. They may have never taken philosophy class, and so you're getting questions that in some way are trying to relate these texts to all sorts of areas of life. And I found that to be very refreshing and make the discussion very rich here. And also people attending, they're not concerned about acquiring a systematic understanding of the text for their grade, for the next quiz or test. And so typically I'll find that the questions are oriented towards practical concerns. In our last discussion, after I gave a short presentation of the book, or maybe a not so short presentation of the book, we talked about how do you approach art? How do you experience beauty? These are all practical questions. So there's this constant attention towards the relation of what we're talking about towards our own lives. And this is something I'm constantly trying to orient my classes towards, but it's very difficult when people have to take a class. And if it's a core curriculum, some people taking a philosophy class have this class in addition to all the classes that they have to take and pass with flying colors for their medical degree, or for whatever reason, they're not majored in philosophy. So there are other pressures, extraneous to what should be driving one's interest in these texts with these sessions. So there's a more practical, more personal bent towards them, and it does make the discussion, I think, much more interesting.
You heard it first here, folks. Hildebrand Project reading groups are better than college, at least better for your soul. I know you're not quite saying that, but I'm glad to hear that how different. Yeah, not having a grade. I mean, there's some sense in which it's real philosophy, right? Well, hopefully that is very interesting to some of you who have been wondering about signing up for reading groups, and that makes you want to sign up for some of them, which is convenient because we have a number coming up very soon, which Catherine Beagle is going to tell us about.
Oh, yes.
Right?
We have groups, both Mario and Catherine, I believe, are leading a group this November. So you can sign up to read The Art of Living or Being the Light of the Redemption with them. But we also have groups on In Defense of Purity with Maria Federica, and Liturgy and Personality with Father James Brent. Both of those are actually starting next week. So go ahead and get signed up for those now. The spots aren't going to last. I think they're both limited at 30 each. And then if you're perhaps a little bit further into Hildebrand and you want to dive deep into the heart, you can have that session with Joseph Seifert. He's one of the original students of Hildebrand, so he can really help you with that text. And then one of our smaller chat books, it's about the size of Being the Light of the Redemption. What is it, like 100 pages, Christopher? Yeah. We have The Personalism of John Paul II with the author, Dr. John Crosby. So he's going to be walking you through that book with some of his insights. So
I'm sometimes jealous that people get to participate in these groups while we just have to organize them and we don't get to actually join them all. They all sound great. Well, just to wrap this up, because and leave hopefully lots more to talk about in future conversations here. Say thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for leading these reading groups. For all of you watching, I hope you'll consider signing up for some. We'll have a link on the video here and in our website, or in the description here. If you're coming to us on YouTube, please subscribe. Go check us out on social media as well, Facebook, Instagram, and on our website. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.